I'm Ezra Levant. It's May 9th, and you're watching Battleground. Hey everybody, Ezra Levant here. We call this the Super Chat every weekday from 12 noon Eastern to 1 p.m. I do a live chit chat, and we call it Super Chat because on the side of the screen you can make a live comment and I'll read them and I'll reply. And if you chip in a couple bucks, the comment is put in a colorful highlight and I see it out of the corner of my eye and immediately read it. And it's also a nice way to help our company go because, of course, we don't receive any government funding. Today, however, I cannot stick around. I actually am recording this yesterday, even though we're running it live today. I have a funeral. But I wanted to say hello and please come back tomorrow because we do intend to do this every weekday. So I announced this on yesterday's show, but I'm just saying this again for people who missed it. I want to show you a fun video. We got a lot of videos at the Rebel. Sheila Gunn Reid, David Menzies. I want to show you a couple of videos from around other parts of the Rebel World Empire. We got folks in Hollywood. We got folks in Florida. We got folks. Here, let me show you another video. Take a look.
The Alberta Teachers Association wants the government of Alberta to tell journalists how to report on provincial exam results. Now, I'd like the Alberta government to tell these teachers about this little thing called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that protects the free press, but I suspect neither group has all that great of a grasp on it. The Alberta Teachers Association, or the ATA, is calling upon the Alberta government to make reporters follow the recommendations of the Canadian Psychological Association when reporting on provincial exam results. Now, this is the motion here from the ATA executive. It reads, "The failure on the part of the press to acknowledge the many other factors other than schooling that are known to influence test performance is misleading and damaging to the integrity of teacher professionalism and student well-being. Be it resolved that the Teachers Association urge the Department of Education to encourage the media to adhere to the joint position statement by the Canadian Psychological Association and the Canadian Association of School Psychologists on the Canadian press coverage of the province-wide achievement test results in reporting and interpreting diploma examination results, school-awarded marks, and achievement test results." Now, the recommendations of the Canadian Psychological Association include having journalists who are reporting on exam results use a full disclaimer in their articles. This is the recommendation here. As a further means of avoiding any misunderstanding on the part of the public, we recommend that a note similar to the following should appear in a prominent position together with any school-by-school breakdown of results. Because children are not randomly assigned to schools, it is impossible to determine the cause of any differences in test results that occur between schools without access to further information. Although this newspaper publishes the following results as a service to the public, we strongly discourage the public from making unwarranted comparisons that may lead to erroneous conclusions. Are these people out of their minds? The ATA says that the failure of the press to acknowledge other factors other than schooling, teaching really, is misleading and damaging to the integrity of teacher professionalism and student well-being. But I think that's probably a pretty disingenuous excuse. Teachers demanding that the government tell journalists how to do their jobs is damaging to teacher professionalism since it demonstrates an extreme lack of understanding of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the free press. But there's something else at play here. Alberta test results are tumbling. They are sinking like a stone across the whole province. An international grade 4 aptitude test taken in 2015 showed Alberta students scoring an average of 484 in math. That's a 40-point drop since 1995. But it's also a very drastic recent drop. The average score in 2005 was 505, and it was 507 in 2011. Then along came Discovery Math, and our numbers tanked. In Edmonton, according to the results of the provincial achievement tests, the percentage of grade 6 students who are meeting the acceptable standard for math has dropped consistently since 2014. In Calgary, students are falling even further behind the provincial average. Here's what I think is happening. Those provincial achievement tests for grade 6 math are coming up again this month and next month. And so the teachers union is just trying to cover their asses, as they know bad results are going to continue to roll in for their crazy curriculum update. There's been an SJW teaching focus and a lack of real consequences for failing teachers. Even as math and general aptitude scores continue to decline, the teachers union continues to make demands for more salary, something we would absolutely never see happen in the private sector. If you're not doing your job, or you're doing your job poorly, you certainly wouldn't get a raise then, would you? And do the teachers union cronies really think that we don't know that kids in schools are different? There have always been different socioeconomic classes in education. There have always been poor kids, hungry kids, affluent kids, and schools that serve these different demographics in different neighborhoods all across the country. Why is the teachers union pretending like income inequality is suddenly a new situation here in Canada? And actually, this idea that different socioeconomic demographics are driving this change in educational outcomes is really just, a garbage excuse. StatsCan data from 2015 shows that there were 1.2 million children across Canada living in low-income households, but the share of low-income population that are children has decreased faster than any other demographic in Canada. So the teachers unions need to come up with a different excuse for why they are failing our kids. These falling test results for school-age children are only going to harm the Canadian economy, and the future of these school kids are going to be damned to struggle for the rest of their lives. Researchers at Princeton's Educational Testing Service analyzed American millennials, the first group of kids who were subject to these new trends in education. The researchers found that American millennials fall short in the skills employers want most: literacy, practical math, and problem solving in technology-rich environments. Alberta's teachers' unions would rather ask their pals in the NDP government to try to control the media rather than teach kids the basics effectively. And I would not be surprised if the freedom-hating NDP obliged them. But what would we expect from a union that paid David Suzuki, who once called for the jailing of people he disagreed with, somewhere between $30,000 to $50,000 to speak to them at their convention? Maybe the teachers union would benefit from having an economist rather than a fake scientist speak to them at their conventions. For the Rebel.media, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid.
So that's from elsewhere on the Rebel. Just a reminder to folks who are tuning in right now, unfortunately, I can't be here in real life today because I have to go to a funeral. I will be back tomorrow. But because you took the time to join, I want to show you one more video from elsewhere in the Rebel World Empire, just because you took the time to join us. So here's another video of some of the other stuff we are doing on the Rebel.
What is it with Democrats and freaky, violent sexual perversions that get them kicked out of office or make them lose their jobs? Well, the most recent Democrat to go down in a disgraceful ball of fire is none other than New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. Now, this is the guy who'd been cooperating with Robert Mueller to try to take down Team Trump out of some political grievance because, of course, the president of the United States can't pardon state-level crime. So Mueller was sharing information with this disgusting pervert to try to take out Team Trump should Mueller's federal investigation fail. If you haven't seen the news on Schneiderman that broke late yesterday, he was forced to resign in disgrace after 4 women accused him of beating them, typically during sex and after he was drunk. One of the women, who's a bit darker skinned, his longtime mistress, said he forced her to call him master, and he would call her his brown slave, and she had to tell him she was his property if she didn't do it he would beat her pretty severely, choking her until he cut off her airway. Other women said that he merely hit on them, and when they rejected his advances, he smacked them so hard in the face with an open hand that they had a welt for days. This guy was the Attorney General of New York State, living out, and he still is until close of business today, living out these perverse sexual fantasies by beating women. This, the New Yorker broke the story, and here are some of the excerpts from that story. Let me find it for you. I just had to close something on my screen there. Now, this guy, remember, Eric Schneiderman, big liberal, champion of the hashtag #MeToo movement, while he's beating women without their consent. These women are just, their stories are horrific. Now, Schneiderman issued a very unbelievable statement. Let's put it that way. I don't believe this for a second. He said, quote, "In the privacy of intimate relationships, I have engaged in role-playing and other consensual sexual activity. I have not assaulted anyone. I have never engaged in non-consensual sex, which is a line I would not cross." And the women aren't alleging that he raped them. No, they're saying that he would become more sexually aroused if he beat them without their consent. And their stories are here. Here's one woman. She says after about 4 weeks, a woman named Manning Barish said she began to see signs of controlling and abusive behavior soon after she started dating Schneiderman. He had her remove a tattoo from her wrist. She said he was trying to control her by, quote, taking a strong woman and tearing her to pieces in his jam. After they became physically involved, sexual, I guess, he became violent, she says. One night, they were in the bedroom of his Upper West Side apartment, still clothed but getting ready for bed, and lightly baiting each other, flirting. As she recalls it, he then called her a whore. She talked back. They had both been drinking. Her recollection of the conversation, she says, is blurry, but what happened next remains vivid. Schneiderman, she says, backed her up to the edge of his bed and all of a sudden just slapped her. These are her quotes. "All of a sudden, he just slapped me open-handed with great force across the face, landing a blow directly onto my ear. It was horrendous. It just came out of nowhere. My ear was ringing. I lost my balance and fell backward onto the bed. I sprang up, but at this point, there was very little room between the bed and him. I got up to try to shove him back or take a swing. He pushed me back down. He then used his body weight to hold me down and began to choke me. The choking was very hard. It was really bad. I kicked in every fiber. I felt I was being beaten by a man," end quote. Said she was crying and in shock. Now, her stories mirror those of the 3 other women. The novelist Salman Rushdie, who also dated this same woman before Schneiderman did, and they remained close friends, says that she confided this to him. And the version she's telling today comports with the version she told him when it happened. So it's a believable story. These women are not alleging that they were sexually abused. They're not out there looking for money. These are all established women in their own right. This woman, Manning Barish, very successful. The other woman who was forced to call him master, Harvard graduate. So these are not women looking for a payday. They do fine in their own right. These allegations are coming from some very credible sources. Now, this woman, Manning Barish, said she sought medical help from Dr. Gwen Korovin, an ear, nose, and throat specialist, and she shared her medical record with the New Yorker. The medical records confirm that the doctor removed dried, bloody crust, pretty bad visual, from her ear, and she thought the slap might have caused the injury. But when Korovin asked her what happened, she said she might have injured herself with a Q-tip. The woman, Manning Barish, claims she was protecting Schneiderman, and she was ashamed. Korovin was asked, the doctor was asked by the New Yorker if the injury could have been caused by a slap, and she said yes, it could have been consistent with a slap, with a Q-tip, or a slap. And so inconclusive, but the account of the event, I always tell you, timeline is everything in an investigation. The account of the event, the date of the event, when Schneiderman supposedly physically abused this woman in relation to when she went to the doctor, and there were signs of a recent injury in her ear. From an evidentiary perspective, support her claim, and it wouldn't be the first woman who lied to a doctor, lied to police because they were ashamed about being assaulted or they were afraid of the perpetrator and they wanted to protect him. Believe me, wouldn't be the first, won't be the last. It's more common than the victims who initially come forward in many respects, especially when the guy is very powerful. Now, that's the bigger problem here. You've got an incredibly powerful person in the Attorney General of New York, tremendous relationships around the country politically, know all the Wall Street power brokers who don't want to get on their bad side. These women were terrified. These women were terrified. And the stories go on and on and on. I mean, this guy was a serial, sadistic physical abuser, still is. What a bad guy. I mean, what a terrible, terrible guy. Now, this is, Eric Schneiderman is just one in a long list of political scandals in New York. The New York Times did a story, The Many Faces of New York Political Scandals, going back a decade. Over 30 current or former state office holders in New York have been convicted of crimes, sanctioned, or otherwise accused of wrongdoing. They put 30 of them up there. Of the 30, 25 are Democrat. 25 are Democrat. You know what this tells me? Tammany Hall is alive and well in New York. But this Schneiderman case is particularly bad in light of all of these other allegations that I'm going to tell you all about, and in light of the fact that Schneiderman was cooperating with Robert Mueller, earlier in the segment, was cooperating with Robert Mueller to try to bring down members of Team Trump in a way that would be impervious to federal pardon, to presidential pardon.
Hey, welcome back. I pre-recorded this yesterday, actually, because I had to go to a funeral today, so I could not be here for our daily chat that we're doing every day from 12 noon Eastern to 1 p.m. Eastern. Normally, I would be here and take your live questions for an hour, but I had to go to a funeral today, but I wanted to say hello to those who joined today and didn't hear my notice I'd be away when I made it yesterday. Let me close with a third and final video from around the Rebel. Just some fun stuff of what we do.
When it comes to cattle slaughtering procedures occurring in Atlantic Canada, just what the halal is going on in PEI? Earlier this year, the CBC ran a glowing profile of a company called Atlantic Beef Products. And this slaughterhouse is a success story. It is the only slaughtering facility in Atlantic Canada. It's not one of those high-volume buildings such as the ones you find in Western Canada, but Atlantic definitely does serve a need for both local farmers and consumers. And the CBC certainly thinks so. Embracing a diversity is our strength narrative, the CBC story was headlined, "Blessed Beef, a Boon for PEI Company." The story noted that many of the employees are Muslim newcomers to Canada, which is fine. But then there was a statement by the company's CEO that created some controversy on the island. Namely, Russ Millard told the CBC that all cattle are slaughtered in the halal method, even though the Muslim population on PEI is perhaps about 2%. Now, the all halal statement is problematic for certain people who are not of the Muslim faith. Sikhs, for example, are forbidden from eating food blessed by someone of another faith, and many devout Christians have a problem with this too. Not sure where the atheists stand on this issue. In any event, Paul McGregor of Skip's Fish and Chips in Summerside, PEI, took issue with the all halal policy as well. And he did a cheeky Facebook marketing campaign in which he noted that his new burger is religion-free. In other words, it is made with non-halal ingredients sourced from Macquarie's Meats. Naturally, McGregor was condemned by the usual suspects for being a bigot for marketing his non-halal burger. Just check out a logic-defying story about McGregor in something called Carbonated TV. The headline states, "Canadian restaurant flaunts bigotry with new religion-free burger." And check out this line of copy from the writer Sam Walker regarding McGregor's decision to go non-halal. Quote, The reason for this preference? Apparently it has nothing to do with the meat itself, but how one company prioritizes creating meals everyone can eat, including adherents to Islam, end quote. Hey, Sammy, what about all those other aforementioned people from other faiths who are actually forbidden to eat Islamic blessed beef, Sam? Sounds to me that you might suffer from Sikhophobia. Gee, who's the bigot now? Well, I put in a call to CEO of Atlantic Beef Products, Russ Millard. I wanted to ask why his company is 100% halal, especially given the very tiny Muslim population on the island. We had a long chat, and Millard came across as being a really good guy. Now, on the subject of halal slaughter, Millard told me that the certification board his company deals with allows the animal to be stunned first. He assured me that this is a far more humane way of ritualistic animal slaughter than halal classic, if you will. As for that other issue at hand, namely the fact that his plant is 100% halal, Millard dropped the bombshell. He told me he was misquoted by the CBC and that it's only a single-digit percentage of cattle that are being slaughtered using the halal process. Well, that changed everything, because the story was no longer about islanders having to eat halal beef sourced from Atlantic whether they wanted to or not. No, the story had now become how unnecessary controversy had been created because of sloppy journalism on the behalf of the CBC. So I reached out to our state broadcaster to see if it planned to issue a correction or clarification. And to its credit, the CBC launched an investigation. And a few days later, CBC spokesman Chuck Thompson informed me that the CBC was standing by its story. Here's what Thompson said, quote, "I heard back from my colleague, Donna Logan, with CBC News and PEI, who spoke to Mr. Millard on Friday. As I understand it, the line you allege that was misquoted was, 'Now all the beef put through the plant are slaughtered in the halal tradition,' he said. This was a paraphrase and not a direct quote, but it was supported by the interview when it first happened, and then again during Donna Logan's conversation on Friday with Mr. Millard. Mr. Millard says that the line is accurate, and he also says he didn't tell you that we misquoted him. All of that to say, we are standing by our story. Thanks for your patience," end quote. What? Well, folks, for starters, if Millard had never said he was misquoted, I never would have contacted the CBC in the first place. So I reached out to Russ Millard again, and again, and again. Over several days, I called him more than probably a dozen times and left behind detailed voicemails. Not a single call back. So I put in a call to the Cattle Producers Association of Prince Edward Island. They told me the best source for information regarding my halal query was Bruce Andrews, who is the procurement and logistics manager at Atlantic Beef Products. So I called him to ask him just one simple question: how much beef is produced via the halal method? Andrews wouldn't say. Instead, he advised me to call, you guessed it, CEO Russ Millard. Now, I followed through with a few more calls to Millard until finally a colleague of Millard's told me he had nothing more to say on the matter and he would not be calling me back. Fortunately, I was able to reach a cattle farmer on the island. He didn't want his name used, but he told me that to make everything more efficient, all cows are indeed slaughtered the halal way at Atlantic Beef Products, even though not all the beef products are labeled halal. He said, quote, "They, Atlantic, were excited about this halal slaughter and never saw a problem," end quote. The farmer told me that in its quest to embrace Sharia, Atlantic never foresaw that certain people of other faiths might take exception to eating cattle that had been slaughtered with an Islamic blessing. But since Russ Millard or anyone else working at Atlantic Beef Products won't return my phone calls, let me state it publicly. When it comes to halal slaughter, which is it, guys? A small percentage, or 100%, or something in between? Or is this a matter of Russ Millard stating one stat that will play well to a CBC audience and another stat that is better suited for a rebel media audience? Mr. Millard, with all due respect, It's time to talk turkey with the people of Prince Edward Island, especially those who want to know what the halal is going on their dinner plate. For the Rebel.media, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies.
My name is Katie Hopkins, the biggest bitch in Britain according to some. And guess what? I'm breaking back into Toronto to come and meet you in person for Rebel Live. Will you come and join me? It's a top team that are going to be there of Rebel contributors and hundreds of Rebels for a brilliant one-day Conservative conference in Canada. Now, I know conferences can be a bit dull. Name badges, soggy sandwiches, but if ours doesn't make you want to stand up and shout hallelujah at least once in the day, I will refund your ticket price myself. The brilliant Sheila Gunn-Reid will be there. She's a brave lady and Alberta's leader of the unofficial opposition. Rebel Mission Specialist David Menzies will be sharing his wisdoms, and even though he's kind of ginger, he's like a really nice guy. And we're thrilled that Islamic reformist and human rights activist Raheel Raza will be on team as well. And my old mucker, who makes me laugh a lot, former NYPD cop and Rebel host John Cardillo will be there. And if that wasn't enough for you all, the bearded wonder boy himself, the official troublemaker-in-chief, Gavin McGuinness, will be taking centre stage. I love him, don't tell him I said that. Your ticket price will include lunch and refreshments throughout the day. Ezra says the snacks are good. That's the official line. And the one thing I've realised about Conservative conferences is that unlike Liberals and Democrats, when they come with them knit their own sandals and socks, our kind of people are just so much better dressed. I look forward to seeing you there. That's Saturday, the 2nd of June. Don't miss out. Get your ticket now. Go to therebellive.com for special early bird ticket prices. I look forward to seeing you in Toronto.
Well, that's it for today. I had to pre-record this because I was out of town, but I will be back in our world headquarters tomorrow, Thursday at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's 10 a.m. Mountain Time for 1 hour of Super Chat. Until tomorrow, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters, keep fighting for freedom.